Elimination is an active process.
And continuous process.
Continues even 3 days after you die.
There you go.
Isn't that amazing? So if you think you can get away without, so elimination through sweat, through breath, through tear, anything that can help you be mobile if possible, do acupuncture to mobilize your chi or your energy, chew your food, through motion, eat, digest, have bowel movements, urinate, all of that motion helps to heal the pathways of detoxification and facilitate the movement of toxins within the body. Welcome to the Help and Hope podcast, where we talk about science and science-based tools for fatigue and chronic illness. I'm your host, Haylie Pomroy, #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Fast Metabolism Diet. I'm a leading health and wellness expert, a PhD student in neuroimmunology, that's right, guys, and a fierce advocate for those in need of a little bit of help and hope. Today, we're going to talk about a very interesting subject, something that's been on the news. It's been talked about politically a lot right now, and that is environmental toxins and how they impact your immune system and your overall health. Today, I'm really fortunate to be joined with Dr. Nancy Klimas. She's a clinical immunologist. You are one of the founders and the director of the Institute for Neuro Immune Medicine. Right. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
And Dr. Irina Rozenfeld, one of our esteemed nurse practitioners at the Institute for Neuro Immune Medicine. Both are currently both are currently seeing patients regularly. And the topic of environmental illness, environmental medicine, toxins in general comes up just about every Friday in our clinical discussion.
Yep.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with saying that why this has been around for a long time. It's made a significant impact on the body's health. We know about situations where, Aaron Brockovich movie, right, with the chromium. We know about lead poisoning in Michigan. But why is it so predominant right now? Do you think that people are starting to talk about it and its overall health impact in the body? Dr. Klimas, let's start with you.
Well, I think we have a more poisoned world.
Nice.
There's just a lot more toxins out there and a lot of health consequences as a result.
Dr. Rozenfeld, what are you seeing clinically?
So air pollution, it was always, and it's right now still the highest exposure patients have. Not necessarily air pollution outside the homes. The construction, the how buildings are built, unfortunately expose patients to environmental pollution. There we have air conditioning. Sometimes it's actually kind of completely closed circuit and there is no fresh air coming to the apartments or houses, which is contribute to exposure to indoor pollution and outdoor pollution. So, and it's important for our clinic, particularly we see in patients with immune dysfunction and environmental exposure is probably number one, but it's very significant, plays significant role in immune dysfunction, all kind of environmental exposures. And environmental exposure, it can be chemicals, it can be persistent organic pollutants. It's maybe debris from herbicides and pesticides, mold and product of molds, mycotoxin. So our patient, unfortunately, but we breathe it in, we eat it with the food because food can be not necessarily organic. And the soil may be not so clean, and then we have a produce which is contribute to exposure. So, but we see in results, and when we investigate an immune dysfunction, then we find that plus as our patient we specialize, the patient with chronic illness and chronic fatigue syndrome, there is a lot of symptoms related to cognitive dysfunction, and it's one of the problems that's pollutants and some of the heavy metals like arsenic can contribute to cognitive dysfunction. So we find in it.
So we have to look at all of those
We're
aspects.
looking and we keep finding.
Yeah. So to that point, and I'll ask you this, Dr. Klimas, we find it in a lot of patients that are dealing with whether it's chronic inflammatory disorders, neuroimmune disorders, immune dysfunction. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Are they having immune dysfunction because they're being poisoned or they have toxic exposure, or because they have immune dysfunction, are they less able to handle the toxic exposure that's out there? Or is it both?
It can go both directions there. So there are different kinds of ways that these toxins can hurt you, right? The way you're thinking right now, and this is very true, that there are a number of toxins, mold toxins are one, organophosphates, pesticides, that poison this cell so that the machinery of the cell can't work and can't function correctly. So our clinic, which is focused on fatigue, we'll see a lot of that because when your cells can't make energy, you're going to have fatigue. So that's one way that the toxins can go. But there's also this little vicious cycle where inflammation can follow a toxic hit. And that's particularly true in the brain. If there was a neurotoxin and you start seeing cell death, a lot of oxidative stress, well, that will trigger a lot of neuroinflammation, which in turn will trigger more cell death, more, and so on. So this vicious cycle. So we have this illness we take care of a lot. And our veterans who were in the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, they had this toxic perfect storm of nastiness that they lived through. And one person in 3 is still sick today from a relatively short exposure. They were there for about 8 months.
Wow.
But they are sick 33 years later from that 8-month of exposure to a whole bunch of toxicants.
Is that because they're holding on to the toxicants?
No, it was a hit and run, I would imagine. That they got a hit. And then they created this vicious cycle in their brain of neuroinflammation and oxidative stress, and it just persisted and progressed and made them chronically ill. So that's one thing. But it's not that clean because you take someone who had a hit and run like that, and maybe even more vulnerable because perhaps they had a traumatic brain injury, they played college football, and they had a couple concussions, then you sent them to a toxic war zone, and they were more vulnerable. We know that to be true, that if someone had a vulnerable brain, they're going to have more long-term sequelae when they get the next exposure. But
long-term sequelae?
Meaning instead of just getting over it, you stay sick.
Got it.
Right? But then you fall back into the world we live in. I can't say someone didn't have more toxic exposures. No, they live here. Of course they got toxic exposures. So we ask the question, what's wrong with their detoxification pathways? Why can't they clean this mess up? And that's a focus of a lot of work. And in fact, in the Gulf War is a good example, not the only illness, but that's a good example. There's a gene that regulates how fast you detoxify. And if you want to see if 1 in 3 are still sick today, after 33 years later, they're the 1 in 3 that have that gene.
Really? And what is the gene?
It's called POM1, and it's a gene that regulates how fast your cells can get rid of toxins.
Wow.
Yeah. Particularly organophosphates.
Do we check that in patients often?
No, it's a researchy thing.
Researchy thing. Okay. Because I'm going now, everybody should be tested for that.
You're like,
to see, I just love to know the why, because then I'm all about food and stuff like that. But then I think, okay, now how could we feed them to support that?
Exactly.
The body actually has a lot of resources. Body is amazing mechanism, and we have liver, which really detoxifying fabric. It's an industrial complex to detoxify, and we detoxify through the skin by sweating and through the breathing and through the kidney and through gastrointestinal tract. We do have mechanism. Sometimes patients have this polymorphism, genetic predisposition, where some pathways are not working well, and we may not have pathways working, though most of the time our lifestyle and our environment, the stress, not sleeping, not eating properly, having chronic inflammation, having chronic infection, chronic illness, and all their normal living kind of is sometimes worse, sometimes less. The body cannot handle all the exposures.
Right.
And we just accumulate more and detox less. And it's a call there, the father of environmental medicine in the United States, Dr. Rea, he called it environmental load.
Right, the environmental load in the body.
He make a picture like a big bucket and that accumulated, and then at some point it's overload, that there is so much exposure that body cannot handle. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a problem because some patients were living in the same household, and one person in the same household will be sick and another is not. So we have different capacity in the body to detoxify, or maybe having different lifestyle.
Hey guys, it's Haylie Pomroy, your host. Right about now, you're probably struggling to achieve the health that you deserve, and you're just not sure what you need to do in order to get it. So what I've done is I've created a special link for you that will give you the nutrition and supplement programs that I use in my private practice to achieve amazing results for my clients and my community. Go to HayliePomroy.com/podcast. Plus, when you use that link, you'll get a 20% discount just because I love you. Again, that's HayliePomroy.com/podcast. Now, back to the episode.
So when a person is coming into INM, to our clinic, is toxic exposure and ability to detoxify one of the cornerstones of things that we feel like we need to address and resolve in order to get a patient well?
Absolutely. Yes. But a lot of that comes from the history too, So we ask, what are your exposures? So we ask it in a way because people may not be aware.
Right.
Particularly if they're living in a toxic house. I still remember the guy that you figured out was eating a ridiculous amount of canned fish that came from someplace in Africa, and that was his favorite food, right? And it was incredibly toxic.
Indian Ocean.
In the Indian Ocean, yeah.
Yeah, and he had this amazing heavy metal load from eating this, something he bought on the shelf at a healthy kind of place, and he just ate a lot of it, and he got really sick from it.
Right. So we do pay attention to environmental exposure. In our clinic, it's one of our cornerstones where we have to review, we're having conversation with the patient, and we're trying to find where it is. And integrative medicine, one of the really helpful modality to control it, right?
Yep.
So how does someone get tested for toxins? Like, do they need to come to a clinic of clinical immunology and go to a specialist? I mean, so many people are not well right now.
Yeah, there's different toxins to test for. So most doctors that practice primary care would know how to test for heavy metals. That's an easy test to order.
Is that in the urine or in the blood?
Or both.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a test you can order at these big laboratories that everyone uses. No names here. But but easy enough to have done. So, they can at least screen for that. When you're looking, though, for mold toxins, it's harder. And there are a couple of laboratories that do a good job at that. And so you'd have to know that. And that's not necessarily taught in medical school. At that point, you actually are going probably to some specialty clinic that knows. And generally, it doesn't have to be our clinic. An integrative medicine clinic would know how to test for toxins.
Or someone in environmental medicine
environmental
general.
Medicine, absolutely. They're harder to find. There's fewer of them.
And in the heavy metal testing, the blood and the urine test, sometimes those are negative though, because the body will store in the bone or the thyroid or the brain tissue, right? It'll store and not be free circulating. Can it still cause havoc, or does it put it away and store it and then there's no more problems?
Sometimes, according to some sources, if it's in the urine, it maybe it just came from the food.
Okay.
And excreted. If the heavy metals in the blood, it means it's already circulated in the body and there is some particular level of exposure. But we also test in hair.
Yeah.
It can be, and it's probably...
It's deposited then at that point?
Deposited at that point, right. And some of what we see more often, we see cadmium, which sometimes did come from smoking, and then have to do smoking cessation with the patient. The arsenic, very common, most of the time coming from rice, can come from chicken, can come from almonds, the industrially grown, and that is actually a problem.
It was interesting because there's a lot of natural health foods that have environmental toxins in them,
Yes.
which is interesting.
Right.
Cassava. So in the ag space, we look at crops that we can use to remediate oil spills, chemical spills, and sunflowers are one of them. So a lot of times you'll go through Texas and you see this massive field of sunflowers and you say, oh, I never knew sunflower seeds were such a good business. But really we grow those kinds of things because they have this high affinity to absorb
To sop up the toxins.
But cassava is one of them.
So some crops absorb more heavy
Yes.
metals than another.
Right.
And the industrial production of the food contribute to a lot of the soil needs fertilizer and needs support. And they put a lot of the chemicals, I would say, herbicides or pesticides, and then vegetables and crops, we pick it up. So some food have accumulate because we grow the food in the soil, which already not necessarily clean.
Right.
We met with you in our travel in Europe. We met with scientists
Yes.
who talk all about soil and tell us how difficult to find the clean soil.
It is, absolutely. And another thing that I was reading recently in the media, because someone said, it's so hard to identify from our food source, which foods would have the highest neurotoxins in them. And a neurologist came out and said, look for foods that are packaged for children. And I said,
That's scary.
is that not scary? But they say they're going to have the most colors, the most addictive chemicals in nature, right? The most refined sugars, and usually a refined complex carb that agriculturally has the highest affinity for arsenic. And they said, children's baby,
Wow.
yeah, isn't that...
That's awful.
It's awful, but it's true.
Wow.
And it's so we know, just go to a traditional grocery store, look at the foods that are packaged for kids,
and don't eat them.
and don't eat them. No, especially when you're in the middle of either one end of the spectrum where you're developing neurologically as a child, or you're my age and hoping to sustain some sort of cognitive function.
You have a stronger nutrition background than anyone I know. What do you say about root vegetables versus leafy greens versus what do you buy when you're sitting in the healthy side of the grocery store to try to avoid the toxins?
Right. So arsenic in an organic form, like in an organic avocado, right? It comes up the root, or even an organic brown rice. Rinse your brown rice, right? I also skim around where the pit of my avocado seed is. That's the highest concentration of arsenic in an avocado. So when you take your pit out, just take a little bit, eighth quarter of an inch of that flesh of the avocado. That's where the highest amount of arsenic sits. Those natural, don't seem to be as, and again, rinse your rice. And if you can steam your rice above the liquid, you're getting most of the starch in the bottom of the water. Same with your pasta. Don't use your pasta liquid to remake your pasta sauce, especially if you're using a brown rice. But if you're using a packaged food, ask the company to send you their post-production heavy metal levels. Yeah, and they're required to have them, and to every single batch. We test in our product every single batch.
Wow.
They're required. So if you have a packaged noodle, especially if you're feeding children, well, if you're feeding any of us, but if you're feeding children or you're feeding somebody with neuroinflammation, to do kind of this assessment. But I really think, I say the higher up the food chain, closer to organ meat and the closer lipid base. So a high marbled fat steak, non-organic, is more dangerous, right, than a lean ground beef. Not great, but if you have to pick your poisons, organ, including eggs, right, would be the higher for the estrogenic or chemical base. So really, and then the soil. The soil is, to your point, is hard. We work really hard to make sure that what we consume orally, right, doesn't have a toxic aspect, because it's really hard to consume what you absorb on your skin and through your lungs and breathing and drinking. I mean, water's a bad one, right?
And when you talk about food and nutrition, also plasticizers. It just come to my head.
Plastics.
The plastics are, it's right now kind of on the news that plastic, everywhere we worry about ocean, which is there is a big spots of plastic just floating. But there is a lot of very microplastics we consume as a food. This is easiest way, just do not use any plastic containers. Do not microwave anything in the plastic containers. Just limit exposure to plastics maximally.
And BPA is just one.
Right.
A lot of people hear this, well, they're BPA free, we're good. Especially when people are heating up, again, I go back to the babies and neurodevelopment, but people are heating up breast milk or formula in a BPA-free plastic bottle. it's just.
And you think that it's just plastic bottles, but cans have plastic linings.
Absolutely.
We actually have machine like Keurig just for baby formula. It's very convenient, but I'm afraid with convenience it's actually not very healthy.
Right.
It may look different, but it's a process the same.
Right. Just imagine.
I don't have plastic cups on my Keurig. I have the little net ones that are biodegradable and go in my garden.
Yeah.
You don't have to put all that plastic through.
Hey guys, it's Haylie, your host. I wanted to bring to your attention the possibility of coming in and doing a study with us. It is called the COVID UP study. And UP stands for Understanding the Post-Viral Phase. You have to be local in South Florida. There are 2 phases of this study. Let me give you the phone number. It's 305-275-5450. And the email is inimresearch@nova.edu. We are currently looking for patients that are dealing with post-COVID, long COVID. We have 2 phases of that study. Please contact us and see if this could be an opportunity for you to get the care and information that you need.
Hola, soy la doctora Ana Palacio, de la Universidad de Miami. Me encantó participar en el podcast de hoy y quería invitarlos a considerar el estudio COVID UP. Este estudio está tratando de determinar por qué las personas no mejoran después de COVID. Si les interesa saber más de este estudio, por favor llamen al número 305-275-5450 o pueden escribir al email inimresearch@nova.edu. Les agradezco mucho su interés y nos vemos la próxima vez.
I want to jump ahead a little bit to molds and the neurotoxic effect with molds. We have a lot of people that have, and I again, it's one of those which I wish we're a dynamic body, so I don't know if the egg or the chicken did come first. Who knows?
Right.
But we have people that have viral reactivation. We have people that have Lyme disease, and there always seems to be some sort of mycotoxin component in that triad.
So that's such an interesting question because, we've talked about how ME/CFS looks just like long COVID. Well, neurotoxic injuries look just like ME/CFS. I can't clinically tell a toxic injury trigger to start these kinds of illnesses from a viral trigger as a clinician.
Wow.
Okay. They look the same. They are very, very similar. And then when we go digging deep into what's wrong with these people, okay, I had a toxic hit and now I have viral reactivation and I got EBV and my HHV6 is going on and I got inflammation, I got neuroinflammation, I got tons of oxidative stress, on and on and on. And then I start listing all the comorbidities that result after years of exposure to all those nasty things going on. And they just start going on and on and on, just long lists of comorbid diagnoses, right?
Right.
So that's how that goes. So I'm not quite sure how you get the chicken and the egg apart there. Instead, I have a patient right now in front of me that has all this stuff going on, and I have to untangle that. don't care that much at this point in time what started it, because it's not going to tell me enough to fix this person. Instead, I have to know what's going on right now. And right now, if they're living in a toxic environment, they need to stop.
Right.
It's poisoning them right now. And you just heard us talking about all the different ways your body detoxifies: liver, kidney. Every single cell in your body has a detoxification pathway. Here's one that we don't talk about. We were just this today. I was chatting with Dr. Locatelli about this, which is lymphatics. So lymphatics, there's a system in your body. You know, you have blood in your arteries and you have blood in your veins, and they're pumping things back and forth to the heart and the body.
Right.
Well, aligned with that, right next to it, is a lymphatic channel where white blood cells and the fluid that the white blood cells circulate in is also going around the body. It wasn't until just about 15 years ago that it was recognized that the brain has lymphatic flow. They call it lymphatics.
And is it unique to the brain?
It's unique to the brain.
About 7 years ago? Yeah.
Was it 7? I don't know. It's just
Somewhere.
not too long ago. And what they found more recently is that when it flows during deep sleep. Okay. And what it's doing is pulling the toxic proteins that are coming out of breaking down cells in the brain out of the brain. The brain is this closed container that you can't just start building up toxins in. It would kill the whole thing. So you need a system that pulls the toxins out of the brain as they're being developed. And one of those systems is this flow of fluid through these lymphatic channels out the brain, down the thoracic duct, and then out to the detoxification systems of the body.
You need to be horizontal.
You need to be
You need
flat.
to be flat.
You need to be deep
and deep sleep.
Deep sleep and flat. Now, let's talk about sleep.
Right.
You didn't think when we were talking about toxins today that we would talk about sleep. But it turns out if you want your brain to be detoxified,
it's
you
the
need
only way.
sleep, and you need to be flat. You can't be up in your chair. You can't have 5 pillows. And you need to sleep deeply. And it's not an easy thing. A whole nother podcast just about sleep. You already had one.
No, but it's good.
And for your brain to lymphatic system to work, you need to be flat and deep sleep. And also you need to be in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning. You need to be in deep sleep for your liver to start detoxifying. And liver to detoxify, there is a phases of detoxification, and there is multiple nutrition request by the liver.
Yes.
Liver needs vitamins and minerals to do detoxification. So nutrition and sleep, this is where I said that integrative medicine come handy, because it's actually pathophysiology required all these steps to complete to detox.
And I love what you said. And I always say, first, like you said, we have to remove the person from the toxic environment. Mm-hmm. That's maybe step 1.
Yes.
But a quick step 2 is we have to then remove the toxins from the person.
And that's not so easy.
No.
And to do that in part, you need to repair the detoxification pathways in the body.
Right. Then in like the hit and run, then you have to heal the damage that the insults caused.
Yeah.
And so I always, we try to look at it from, if we can identify removing the person, but I always say 1 and 2 are so close, because you can remove the person from the environment, but if they're storing toxins, if they're not sleeping well, flat, 3 o'clock, this is my shift work people. I mean, my shift work people that are up at nurses that are up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm just cry for their liver, because
it's sometimes even easier. I always kind of talk with patient about the gastrointestinal function, and if patient complain about constipation, I know that they probably have a bigger problem with detoxification. And 95% of American population do not eat enough fiber.
Right.
And if we don't eat fiber, there is no process to remove the toxins.
And you want to talk about a vicious cycle. Most packaged fiber foods have the highest arsenic level in the United States.
That's wild.
So I know, isn't that crazy?
Joy.
So a fiber-based, I wouldn't buy a fiber, I'm not going to name a name, but I wouldn't go out and buy a non-organic fiber product, right? To help with that, organic fruits and vegetables.
Right.
And if you are eating a lot of organic fruits and vegetables, double down, because you're not eating enough.
Right. And I'm going to say that what is the number 2 selling drug in the country right now, I think, is the Ozempic drugs, which cause tremendous constipation.
Yes.
So we have a whole generation of people trying to lose weight while they're developing more and more toxic exposures. And they're not eating right foods because they're trying to lose weight, and they may not be double downing on their greens and their...
And they're releasing triglycerides from the adipocytes into the bloodstream, which are loaded with toxins.
We might just have to do the GLP-1 clinic, right? Okay, all you GLP-1 people, let us... I used to say, where are the clinics for these people that got their gastric bypasses because they lost the chunk of their gut that was supposed to absorb all these important vitamins, and then they just went into the community, hope you do okay. No one took care of them, right? Well, now we have these GLP-1 people, and they're just all over the place begging for the drug and not realizing that there's consequences and that there's some things they could do to more safely take it.
Right. But all of our coaches that we certify are flooded right now with people coming off of the GLP-1s. I mean, for many reasons, but constipation is one of them. Toxic load is one of them. And a post, it's been an interesting, I'll tell you, in my space, when some of these things come about, I just go, I thought I was going to retire someday, but I guess that's job security.
That's how I felt about long COVID. I said, man,
I thought I was going to retire.
Why did this have to happen when I reached this stage in my career?
If you were to say that someone out there, there's testing for your home, right? We can have people come in. Have you guys ever experienced that, either one of you or
Absolutely. Yes. I have a personal story because I'm going to give Sharon McQuillan and my friend Irina Rozenfeld here. They did a intervention on Nancy, who was the denier of her health problems. But I was getting very sick a few years ago. And as it turned out, they called in the inspector that was amazing. And my house was incredibly messed up because I'd hired someone to replace all my air conditioner ducts that I thought, all the tubing up in the attic. I thought, well, that's smart. My 50-year-old house needs new tubing. And they glommed it all together with electrician's tape. And it had fallen apart up in the attic. And I was air conditioning my attic, which caused moisture, mold, and it was open, so it was sucking in down onto the chair that I was working from home during the pandemic. So I was just sitting there getting sicker and sicker and sicker.
And were they able to test the air? Did they test the fabrics in the house?
They did everything. And I loved her. It wasn't even that expensive. It cost a few $100s to do the whole thing. But they put out the little plates to measure molds here and there. Right. They took samples. She went up in the attic and found out what the problem was. She was amazing. She did a fabulous job.
And did you have your house remediated?
I did.
And did it make a positive impact?
Tremendous difference.
Wow.
I mean, just completely turned my health around.
Wow. If you don't mind me asking, how did you notice that things were going on? Were you having respiratory issues?
I had asthma, and I had not had asthma as an adult. I've had asthma a few times, like after a bronchitis or something, but not commonly. But I was everyone was saying, Nancy, you cough all the time. And I was like, just cough. But
don't be so nosy.
That's can cause cardiotoxicity.
And I was having many issues. Let's just say that I was getting the constellation of bad things going on. And so, there's an allergy cell. It's called an eosinophil, and we should have less than a couple % circulating. I got to 18%.
Wow.
That's as much as you get when you have a parasite
That's
infection.
What I was going to say. You either had a parasite or so your eosinophils were, wow.
My house was like killing me, literally killing me.
Wow.
So I was glad to discover it. And it made me a little born again on this, get the molds out of your life experience.
Wow.
And I've had to have it retested and do other little things to make it better. It's not perfect because I still live in the same house.
We have a lot in construction, as I mentioned, there is a lot of hidden problems because sometimes how we build.
Yes.
There is an empty space between their walls. There is a plastic plumbing, and it all can contribute to water accumulation. I would recommend to have a professional evaluation, hire very good quality professional, and usually related, there is special certification for indoor environmental assessment. We're certified, we're trained, we kind of medically supported how to do it.
And they
Maybe not the same company what doing remediation.
Yes, I say they shouldn't be from the company that does remediation. They had to be independent evaluators that have no skin in the game. They come out and do this. Now, there are kits you can buy that you're not as good as one of these professionals.
Right.
But,
At least if it's
the big
positive,
box hardwares have these kits where you can swab things and send them to a lab and have a report back in a couple weeks.
I had a client. She was a Grammy Award singer, and she was having all kinds of vocal cord, issues and polyps and histamine and mast cell stuff. And we ran some blood antibody testing for molds and stuff. And her husband said, don't tell me some remediator is going to come out and test. And so we made sure that it was an independent person. Well, actually, I made the suggestion. I didn't know if they had followed through. It was about 7 weeks later, I ran by the house to drop something off, and they have this, big, beautiful music studio on one side, and their furniture, everything was out in the front yard. And I thought, you mean they have yard sales in this neighborhood? I was like, woohoo! Did I bring cash? No, but they had 2 stories of black mold on one of the walls, and I mean, and they got out and moved out, but they had to have all of their, it was in the state of California, they have to have all of their linens and their clothing and the drapery and, everything.
Yeah, no, it's
everything
a great
done.
Big deal to get rid of it. I had to move, get rid of almost all of my furniture and start over.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that they can present in all kinds of weird ways. And we did have a woman that presented very thin. She was losing weight, psychotic, admitted multiple to psych hospitals, who had previously had no mental health history whatsoever. And her husband, who was a physician, brought her to us. And we said, you have to check this house for mold. And he said, no, it's a new house. We bought it. We helped design it. It's exactly right. No. So 3 admissions later, their son gets asthma and rashes, and said, come on, just get a...
What's it going to hurt? Yeah.
Right. Just like that. The person that had constructed a brand new home had put the gutters in backwards and ran the water down the interior wall. So they had an entire wall of black mold between the interior and the exterior of their house. You couldn't see it, but it was like a gas chamber. It's not the mold that you're having a reaction to. It's the mycotoxin, the toxin the mold is making. And it's just making all those toxins behind the drywall, shoving them out into your airspace. And then that air conditioner that doesn't let any new air in just keeps concentrating and concentrating. Concentrating. There's no air exchange. So whatever toxin you had yesterday, the new toxin just gets added to that.
Wow.
Right?
It can be a big problem in condominiums, because not everything individual can control. And particularly after hurricanes, after flooding, the big building can have some leaks somewhere. It's accumulated between the walls. Sometimes sometimes you can smell it in a big lobby. You come in a big building and you have sometimes
canaries.
Some people can recognize.
Yeah.
It can actually come with nasal congestion and headache, and some people actually do feel it.
We had a client that was sick at work all the time, and it wasn't mold. It was when you talk about condominium, they were repaving something else. Anyway, the intake duct was right where the machine that was making the asphalt had its exhaust blowing into the intake duct. Yeah. And they did an air quality testing at the workplace.
I have absolutely seen that.
And she literally, she said, and they wanted her to go out on leave. They thought she was having stress with another employee. And she's like, I'm not having stress with an employee. I just come to work. I get a headache. I have, blurred vision. I don't feel well. But a lot of people at her work were getting sick, but she was kind of the canary in the coal mine, and she was getting really, really sick. She did an independent air quality, and then when it came back, she went to HR and they ran another one. And I mean, it was bad. They sent everybody home, and and handled it. What I think was
sick buildings are real.
Yeah, sick buildings are real. Let me ask you this: how
it can contribute to autoimmunity. Besides, it is gonna affect immune system and can contribute to immune deficiency, but it also can contribute to autoimmunity.
So as you say that, I am a firm believer for myself, my own personal health, that I think I told you when I was young, I was about 17, we sprayed for malathion in the state of California for met flies. And you had to be in your home and you had to cover your cars. And it was fine for you, but you had to cover your cars so that it wouldn't corrode the paint. And a bunch of us were out with the horses goofing off. And the planes would come over and dump the malathion. And we got drenched. I mean, it was orange.
It's terrible.
And it was very interesting because I had a lot of environmental, then I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder. I hemorrhaged at 19. So 2 years later, right? When I was then in my 20s and rebuilding my health, I went to an environmental medicine doctor and I hadn't even thought about it. And he said, he was naming the chemicals. He goes, it's weird. It's like in malathion or something. He was looking back.
Wow.
Yeah. And I went,
oh, yeah.
I know malathion. He says, what? I was sprayed for met flies, and it was, but I really believe that triggered my autoimmune disorder.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And years later, talking to oncological hematologists and studying the mechanism of that particular chemical, that insecticide, that it really has an affinity for the platelets. So yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a big believer in that, having backtracked and expressed it myself. Probably have the genetic predispositions to be a little canary in the coal mine for sure, but it can completely change your immune system.
Yep.
Absolutely.
This is important for our patients. We like to ask questions about environmental exposure. Where do you live? If we live somewhere close to the farm land, or where exposure to the big nurseries and
golf course.
Orange groves.
My
oh my
patient-
gosh, we have these
Orange
patients
crops.
because they fly over with the pesticides over the groves, and then people have their dream homes tucked away in this beautiful grove. They cannot avoid getting really big hits of pesticides.
Well, it was interesting. We used to manufacture turkey jerky in our company. And when COVID hit, there was a study that came out about non-organic turkey having very, very high chemical, especially turkey breast. I'm going to space the name of the chemical, but very, very high chemical concentration. And that study came out. It was, not as popular because everything with COVID, but the organic turkey demand for pet treats became incredibly high because people did not want it, because this particular toxin caused leukemias in dogs.
Oh my!
Right. This is a whole long story. So we lost our manufacturer, our source for organic turkey, because they could sell it for twice as much in the pet industry than they could in the human industry.
Wow. So what were we eating then?
Exactly. But we also see the value in treating our animals, right? Not letting our animals, people talk about washing their dog's paws off after going to the park so that they don't have chemicals on their feet, right? Yeah. But we walk through our homes. I always say one of the easiest things is to blow your nose and take your shoes off when you get to your house. Try to keep your house, and if you can put your shoes outside or in the garage, even better, right?
Yep. No, we have a bin of shoes. Everyone pops their shoes off when they come in.
So I want to wrap up.
No, you didn't talk about Roundup, and you should. Okay.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah, because I'm going to say that we measure Roundup, not absolutely everybody, but we measure Roundup. And have we ever found a negative Roundup ever?
No.
Can I ask you, how is it even on the market still?
No, I do not know, but your body has it. Even if you think you're eating organic, our most diligent people who never eat anything that's not off the organic aisle have measurable Roundup.
Okay, there's been so many class action lawsuits. There's so much science behind.
Plenty of science. It's a nasty poison.
And my neighbor was using it the other day.
Yeah. And
no gloves, no mask.
We're on well water.
Yeah.
And the neighbors use Roundup. You're like, oh, it's in my water. But it's a nasty thing. I know that my granddaughters go to this great Montessori school. Keturah, shout out. And when my daughter picked that school, I went on the tour and I said, do you use Roundup? She says, no, we only use essential oils. They were so perfect. And I've never been to a school that could say adamantly that they made a conscious decision not to expose these children to those toxins.
That was one of the things when my kids were growing up that they always say, will you donate paper plates? Will you donate, art supplies for the teachers? And I said, I will handle all of the weed mitigation. I have a degree in ag and soil sciences, all of the pest mitigation, and I will deliver all the soaps for all the children, please. They said, as long as you pay for it. And I was like, great. But it was, they say some of the sickest buildings are schools.
I totally believe it.
Yeah,
And
between spiders and bugs.
From the report of the patients, yes, it's true.
That first big Roundup settlement was a school grounds worker that had been working with Roundup every day of his working life in a large school ground.
I just don't understand when a class action lawsuit is, there's several at this point. Same with the talc, the baby powder, how it's still commercially available. Well, I guess what I want people to know is everybody's talking about the toxic burden on the body, right?
Yeah.
And helping to identify where the toxins are. And if your physician won't partner with you in figuring out if your body's having a difficult time detoxifying or if toxins play a critical role in your inability to go towards wellness, right? Pick a different physician. That's my first. My daughter was in the hospital and you had me fire the hospitalist.
I did.
Yeah, I love you for that. You have no idea. We got the best doc afterwards. And I was like, Nancy told me I could, and I'm feisty, but I just, in that crisis situation, I appreciate you for saying that. So I'm going to tell everybody that. Don't hesitate to find a better advocate for yourself. But you said something which is not one of your people don't show up with this particular toxin. So it's pretty safe to say that addressing pathways of detoxification and creating a clean environment in sleeping flat and well are three essential things towards.
And you are what you eat. This is so important. This is your lesson, but we need and clean foods, but we also need to eat a lot of antioxidants because that's what powers our detoxification pathways.
And diversity in food. The studies, I've been for 30 years, I've been a proponent in changing your food and rotating your foods, right? Not just
rainbow foods.
Some patient needs accommodation. I would say I always push it, fruits and vegetables. I think patients should not afraid to eat fruits. The microbiome will take care about sugar.
Absolutely.
But pectins, it's all kind of fiber which we take care of. Detoxification.
The prebiotics that feed the gut bugs.
Exactly.
Fruits are fabulous.
Probiotics are not as important as the prebiotics.
Yes.
So eating vegetables and fruits. Some patient will need accommodation. Some patient, if you have IBS, you may not allowed and shouldn't eat raw vegetables. And raw, you may need cooked vegetables. But still, vegetables and fruits, I would say I always recommend experiment.
Yes.
Bring to eat different fruits. Eat fruits which you never eat before. Try something new with this kind of diversification of your microbiome. Absolutely. It's much easier than expensive probiotics.
Absolutely.
So, and I want a patient do not afraid of fruits and the sugars.
I love that you said that, those natural sugars. And this is, I'll end with this. Elimination is an active process.
And continuous process.
Even 3 days after you die.
There you go.
Isn't that amazing? So if you think you can get away without, elimination through sweat, through breath, through tear, anything that can help you be mobile if possible, do acupuncture to mobilize your chi or your energy, chew your food, through motion, eat, digest, have bowel movements, urinate, all of that motion helps to heal the pathways of detoxification and facilitate the movement of toxins within the body.
Absolutely. Keep the toxins moving out.
So
we wouldn't have so many detoxification pathways. I'm talking Darwin now. We wouldn't need so many. We wouldn't have created this many over these generations if the body didn't need it. But the toxic burden of the last 100 years far overwhelms any potential for a little Darwin to pick up and start doing some increased capacity to do detoxification.
And I don't know anybody that can get away with not doing something actively and purposefully in the United States anyway and staying healthy, nothing that you're exposed to anymore in the United States on a daily basis is conducive to being healthy. You kind of have to make a conscious effort to eat well. I mean, if you drive through fast food, they're not handing you pre-prepared like grandma used to make, right? Or whatever, foods that are going to promote health.
It's not anything I can think of you can eat in a fast food situation.
Right.
But, they say...
And they're on every corner.
You shop the outer perimeter of the grocery store and leave the middle alone. And then cook your foods and eat an awful lot of colorful things that are mostly from the vegetable side of the grocery store.
If you can grow it yourself or pat the farmer on the back that did it, the more local is definitely a key too. So, well, thank you so much for having this discussion. I think a lot of people right now need individuals like yourselves cheering them on, egging them on, encouraging them to look at their environment and look at the impact that it's having on their bodies. Because I think sometimes we feel a little separated from where we're at and a little out of control in our health and knowing that we can have some really practical things. I'm going to go get some deep sleep tonight.
or you can have a friend like Irina who does an intervention.
Yes, who will come and test your home and make you well again. Yes, Dr. Klimas, we need you around. Thank you so much for being here. I hope I'll have you back.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.